Hello, I'm Lucy Hockings. From the BBC World Service, this is The Global Story. Ever since the release last summer of her box office hit, It Ends With Us, Blake Lively has been dominating the gossip columns as a reported rift with her co-star Justin Baldoni became increasingly public. Rumours and allegations followed, from sexual harassment and smear campaigns to bullying and creative sabotage. But rival lawsuits filed by the pair in recent weeks have fanned the flames, shedding new light on the covert warfare of celebrity PR in the process. So how did this saga begin? And with the threat of future litigation, will it end up in court? With me today is BBC Entertainment reporter Yasmin Rufo. Hi, Yasmin.
Hello.
Well, if people haven't been following this story in depth, it could kind of just sound like there's two big Hollywood stars who are falling out. But this has become so much more than a feud between high-profile celebrities. And before we get into the detail, I think we need to understand who these two people are. So give us some background on Blake and Justin.
Well, Blake is the bigger of the two stars. She's the big Hollywood actress that people might instantly recognise. Obviously, she rose to fame in Gossip Girl many years ago, but since then she's been in so many different films and TV programmes. And I suppose as well as her sort of curated image that she has as an actress, she's also married to fellow actor Ryan Reynolds. They've got children together. They have this really well curated brand. She is best friends with Taylor Swift. Anyone that was watching the Eras tour would have seen her and Ryan and their children at the tour and at some of the shows. So she is a really big star that has got powerful allies and a huge online
And she's
following.
always been seen as a bit of a golden girl as well.
Oh,
a real
she has.
aspirational figure.
Yeah, you can do no wrong. Blake Lively can do no wrong. People have always thought she's beautiful, she is wonderful, she's got these powerful friends, these allies.
These beautiful children, an amazing husband, the whole package.
Exactly, she is the whole package, and Hollywood has always seen her and her husband as the whole package.
And what about Justin Baldoni?
Justin is another big Hollywood star. He is probably best known for his role in Jane the Virgin, which ran for a number of years. He also now runs a production company called Wayfarer Studios, and that's the production company that actually bought the rights to this film. Really, it was Justin Baldoni that wanted to create that film through his production company because they bought the rights.
And Yasmin, how has he positioned himself? Because he describes himself as a feminist.
He does describe himself as a feminist, and I think before this lawsuit came out, he was also very much celebrated. He's got a number of awards from women's organisations that promote him as a feminist and an ally for women in the industry. So both of these two names are seen as, big Hollywood figures, but also sort of the perfect packages.
And in terms of the movie, it's one of those ones, because it's based on a novel that went viral, that there was a huge amount of anticipation around. I mean, lots of people were looking forward to seeing what these two stars did with a book that they loved.
Most young women around the world were absolutely desperate for this film to come out. And I think when it was announced in 2019 that it was going to be turned into a film, there was so much excitement and hype around it. It Ends With Us is just one of the most viral novels. It sold 20 million copies. It's got more than 1 billion tags on TikTok. So it really is a book and now film that people were so excited for. And so there was so much anticipation even before the movie came out.
So Yasmin, let's start with the Blake Lively lawsuit. Two main elements to the filing, and the first are actually allegations of sexual harassment. What is it that she is alleging?
So she's made claims against Mr. Baldoni and the lead producer on the film of repeated sexual harassment and other disturbing behaviour. Now, in more detail, these allegations relate to things like his discussion of his pornography addiction, his discussion of his genitalia, and entering her trailer uninvited, including when she was undressed or breastfeeding. They have categorically denied that there was any sexual harassment on set.
And then there was this reported meeting, in which she made a list of demands, we understand, that she wanted fulfilled before she continued shooting the movie. I mean, what were those demands?
In January, when they were shooting the film, she called a meeting to address this hostile work environment, as she calls it. And that meeting included executives, but it also included her husband, Ryan Reynolds. And some of the demands at the meeting that she made included having a continuous presence of an intimacy coordinator, making no more descriptions of their own genitalia, and no friends of the producers and directors being on set during scenes when Blake Lively was in a state of nudity. There are some other demands as well, including Justin Baldoni not making any reference to the fact that he could contact Blake Lively's dead father. She did say very specifically that if these demands were not met, she would not continue filming.
And is this lawsuit the first time that we heard these allegations of a smear campaign that Blake Lively says was launched against her? I know we're going to talk more about this in more detail later, Yasmin, but tell us about some of those claims.
So this is the first time we heard of the smear campaign in this lawsuit. So like you mentioned, that lawsuit's got two elements. The first part is this sexual harassment element, but the second part is this smear campaign. Now, she alleges that Mr. Baldoni's team created this smear campaign to prevent her from publicly outing what was happening during filming. Obviously, Mr. Baldoni and his lawyers completely deny this, but essentially the lawsuit says that Baldoni orchestrated a plan to destroy her reputation in the press and online, including hiring a crisis manager who led a sophisticated, coordinated and well-financed retaliation plan, and essentially used this thing called a digital army to post social media content about her that seemed authentic and would turn people against her. Blake Lively's team say that essentially this negative press has affected all aspects of her life, and it was able to suppress other narratives, i.e. what she might have said that Justin Baldoni was doing on set.
So that's the Blake Lively lawsuit. But at the same time, Justin Baldoni files a lawsuit of his own, suing the New York Times, and it's because the Times were one of the first publications to report on these allegations. What's Justin Baldoni's lawsuit all about?
He and 9 other plaintiffs, including his publicists, have brought a $250 million lawsuit against the New York Times, essentially alleging them of libel and false light invasion of privacy. So Justin Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, he told BBC's partner CBS that the newspaper aided and abetted a smear campaign designed to revitalise Lively's floundering image.
And we've also heard from Brian Friedman in an interview with NBC, haven't we, Yasmin? And is this where we learnt that he intends, and Justin Baldoni intends, to countersue Blake Lively personally?
So Justin Baldoni's lawyers have said they will absolutely file a lawsuit against Miss Lively. They haven't set out exactly what will be in that countersuit. They've denied the smear campaign, and they've also brought up other things like the fact that Miss Lively didn't read the source material on the film, and actually they accuse her of orchestrating her own smear campaign. So we've got a slight insight there into some of the things that might come up in that counter lawsuit.
So, Yasmin, they've made this film together. It ends with us. It's widely anticipated. Was it a box office success?
It absolutely was a box office success. It took home $350 million at the box office, which is no small feat. So even though there were all of these rumours of things happening, the film still was a success. I don't think anyone's surprised that it was a success, given how we were talking earlier about just how successful the book was and how excited people were. There was just so much anticipation.
And I think people were also, because of what they could sense was brewing, interested in the press tour that accompanied the film. You were there. You reported on the press tour for It Ends With Us. What was it like?
So I think what was really interesting about this premiere is that by the time they got to London, they had already done a number of premieres in the US, and rumours started spiralling at the New York premiere when they were not spotted together in any photo. So usually you'd expect co-stars to have their picture done together, they'd walk the red carpet together, they'd do press interviews, but they did them totally separate. So you've got Justin Baldoni and his wife having their pictures taken and him doing press on one side, and then you've got Blake Lively, Colleen Hoover, Brandon Sklenar, the other actor in the film, having their pictures together and doing press together.
And Yasmin, as a journalist attending the premiere, were you given any direction from the PR teams? Were you told there were certain things you should ask or could ask or shouldn't ask?
At the London premiere, we were essentially warned as press not to ask Blake Lively any questions about Justin Baldoni whatsoever, which is obviously very unusual to be told that you can't ask an actor about their co-star in a film. The other things we were told were not to ask questions that were too heavy-hitting, to keep things nice and light and fun, and to avoid talking about domestic abuse, which is one of the main themes of the film.
I work as a presenter on a daily news programme on the BBC News Channel, and interviewees are not able to make demands about the questions that they're willing to answer. Is this usual, Yasmin, in the entertainment space, that PRs are able to come and kind of manage the press in this way?
It's actually really uncommon. So in entertainment reporting, it should be just the same as it is in news reporting. We cannot have publicity teams telling us what we can and can't ask. And we usually and very often do turn down interviews where we are told you can't ask about X, Y, Z if we think they're relevant to the film. I think there are ways of getting around it, which is clearly what happened at the press tour here, where we get told, of course, you can come to the red carpet, you can ask whatever you like, and then about a minute before Blake Lively comes to you on your spot to interview her, you get whispered in your ear, don't do X, Y, Z. If you do, we'll drag her away. So it's not common for them to set out these demands, and we would never agree to these demands in advance, but you can tell that there are ways around them.
Let's look at this so-called smear campaign, which Blake Lively says was orchestrated to destroy her reputation. Because something that became a really big focus, it seems, online was the manner in which she was promoting the film. And Blake Lively, it seems, came in for a lot of criticism for that.
For a film about domestic abuse, the press tour was probably not what you would have expected. Especially the London one. There were pink carpets, there were flowers, there was a promo of Blake Lively's new hair care brand. Her husband was promoting his gin brand at the after party. So really, if you looked at the premieres and the red carpets, you wouldn't associate this film with actually being quite a harrowing film about domestic abuse. She also came under criticism for perhaps some clumsy promotional tour videos. At one point she told a journalist people should grab their friends, wear their florals and head out to see it. And I think that sparked some backlash in terms of one person online I saw saying that it seemed a bit like this was the sequel to Barbie. And actually, if you look at the film and you watch the film, it is anything but that. And I suppose in contrast then, Justin Baldoni tried to position himself as someone who really wanted to talk about the domestic abuse angle and how that was so important to shed a light on that. So you can tell that they both had very different perspectives when it came to the tour, and they had very different views on how they were going to promote the film.
And in terms of what was happening online, what other content started to emerge about Blake Lively?
So after those clumsy promotional tour videos came out, people already were a bit angry with Blake Lively, I think it's fair to say. Then a number of videos started resurfacing of previous interviews that she'd given. One of the biggest ones that sort of really caught a light on the internet was an interview she did in 2016 with a Norwegian journalist called Kirsty Fla. And Kirsty Fla posted a video on YouTube around the same time that all of this negative press was coming out about Blake Lively, and it was titled The Blake Lively Interview That Made Me Want to Quit My Job. Now, it's important to say that since the lawsuit has come out, Kirsty Fla has said that she has got absolutely nothing to do with Justin Baldoni and the smear campaign, and instead she was just putting out a video that she felt very hurt by at the time. But that is just one example of people sort of implying or saying that Blake Lively was difficult to work with in the past. She wasn't perhaps this beautiful Hollywood star that was perfect, and actually she maybe wasn't as nice behind the scenes.
I mean, Yasmin, the volume of negative content that came out was huge. It felt like it was everywhere at the time. And is that what led Blake Lively to hire a brand marketing consultant to find out what was happening?
We really can't underestimate how much negative content there was on the internet about Blake Lively. It was everywhere. It was almost hard to find something positive about her, whether that be the old interviews she was giving, whether that be interviews that she was giving on the press tours that made people hate her. But yes, she hired this brand marketing consultant to sort of look at what was happening. And this is something we've only since found out in the lawsuit. We didn't know at the time that she was doing this. But analysis reportedly showed that 35% of Google results on her name also referred to Justin Baldoni. And the consultant said that essentially this was highly unusual given the length of her career, given that she's the big Hollywood star and she's sort of famous in her own right. You wouldn't expect that to be coming up.
So, Yasmin, is it clear, though, how an alleged campaign like this would be carried out?
In the lawsuit, it says that this smear campaign was carefully crafted, coordinated, and a resourced retaliatory scheme to silence her and others from speaking out. There's this sort of reference to a digital army. We don't really understand what that digital army is, but the claims also say that this was an organic campaign. So it's not bots on the internet. There are people that are feeding into this story and they're creating content that at least seems authentic, which then kind of the ball spirals from there.
And then there's this big point of contention about Justin Baldoni hiring a crisis manager. How does that exactly work, and what does it tell us about how celebrity PR works as well, Yasmin?
Well, Justin Baldoni hired a woman called Melissa Nathan. She is a very She's a big name in the world of PR. Her previous clients have included Johnny Depp during the trial with Amber Heard and the likes of Drake as well. Justin Baldoni says essentially he hired Melissa Nathan to protect him from Blake Lively's threat. So it wasn't that she was there to actively create a campaign against Blake, but instead protect Justin Baldoni's interests. And in the age of social media, PR has become highly elaborate. And in the lawsuit, I think one of the things that stuck out for me was one of the texts that we can see where Miss Nathan says, "You know we can bury anyone." So these PRs really do have the power to create and shift and change a narrative, even though, of course, Justin Baldoni is saying that is not the reason he hired this crisis PR
How do
team.
we know all of this, Yasmin? How did this information all come to light?
Well, in the lawsuit, there are thousands of documents, messages, texts, emails, and they've all been subpoenaed. And the New York Times says that they have verified all of these allegations and they've reported these allegations faithfully. But on the flip side, Justin Baldoni is saying actually what's happened here is the New York Times have gone through these thousands of messages and they've cherry-picked misleading messages. They've picked out the ones like the one we just spoke about where Miss Nathan said, "You know we can bury anyone." They've picked out these messages that paint a picture that Justin Baldoni is in the wrong.
And Yasmin, in terms of some of the comments and the support and the criticism we've seen online, it feels like there's been a real pendulum swinging different ways. Where are we at with it now?
Since the lawsuit came out, things have obviously changed for Blake Lively. A number of women have come out to support her. But what's really interesting is the number of women in Hollywood, or even just on social media in general, coming out and saying, "We're really sorry for how much we hated you over the summer. We believed everything we saw online. We too thought that you weren't a nice person, and now we want to say sorry, and we're really sorry for not believing you." So I think that's been a really interesting shift there. And I suppose on the flip side, Justin Baldoni had a lot of support over the summer when everyone was hating on Blake, and there were lots of people coming out and saying, "Look at Justin Baldoni, who's doing the press tour right. He's talking about domestic abuse. He's really highlighting how important this film is compared to sort of maybe the light take that Blake Lively was having on the film."
So what a lot of people now want to know, what happens next?
Well, I think that's something that everyone wants to know. And whilst we don't have any clear timeline or path right now, we imagine that a settlement is eventually likely to come. If this does go to court, it will be a huge lawsuit. I mean, we already know the amount of interest in both of these two stars. The internet is still obsessed with what's going on. They're obsessed with what happened in the summer. They're obsessed with the lawsuit and now the counter lawsuit. So it really will be a big deal if it does reach court. The other thing is, before it even reaches the settlement or the court, it's about the reputational damage that both of these two stars have suffered. Obviously, Blake Lively suffered hugely in the summer, and now Justin Baldoni's reputation is taking a real hit. He's been dropped by his talent agency, and he recently had an award rescinded by an organisation that gave him this honour for women's solidarity. And earlier we spoke about how he's always positioned himself as a feminist and an ally for women in Hollywood. So for him to have this award taken away from him, he has taken a real battering there.
But Yasmin, did you find it interesting that we didn't see Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds or Justin Baldoni at the Golden Globes the other night?
Absolutely. The Golden Globes is one of the highlight of the Hollywood calendar. It's a massive ceremony. It's the precursor to the Oscars. You'd imagine anyone who's anyone in Hollywood to be at that award ceremony. So I think it was really interesting that they weren't there. I think even more interesting than that is the fact that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds weren't there, especially as Ryan Reynolds' film Deadpool was nominated. So in other circumstances, without this lawsuit, you would have probably expected them to have turned up. So what's clear is they're both taking a step away from the spotlight. They've also not given any press interviews. They're not doing any media since the lawsuit's come out. They're just really letting it play out without them getting involved.
And what a trial that would be if it did go to court. Yasmin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy.
If you want more episodes of The Global Story, you can find us wherever you get your BBC podcasts. Every day, we dive deep into one big international story. Don't forget, you can also subscribe so you never miss an episode, and we love to hear from you, so do leave us a comment in the section below. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.